Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FBA Virtual Lounge Social Work Edition. My name is Stanley Philippe. I am a recruitment officer here at Carleton University. I hope you had a lovely weekend. If you're tuning in from Ontario, you most likely experienced a bit of snow last night / this morning. So hopefully you're all fanatics of the snow. If not, then it's a gentle reminder that Carleton University does have tunnels. So if you do come to Carleton, you can avoid Mother Nature altogether on days like today. But for most of us here, that first snowfall is really kind of a reminder of the season. We're entering holiday season. Everyone's kind of happy and hopefully feeling cheerful, and certainly looking forward to a really healthy conversation tonight. Social work is one of those special programs that Carleton offers, and it's special because, in my opinion, it makes a difference. It really does, can, and will make a difference in our communities. But I think it's best that you hear it from folks who are directly involved in the program. And that's exactly what tonight's going to be all about. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to hear from a professor and a student. It'll also give you an opportunity to ask your questions. And so we really invite our participants to utilize the live event Q&A to ask questions directly to, again, our team. We are definitely here to help answer those questions. I think this time of year, especially because a lot of students are starting their applications, and so they're really starting to do a deeper dive into the topics that are interesting to them. And they want to really understand, if they do apply to a Bachelor of Social Work, what that will entail, what that will mean for their future. So I'm hoping that you will really kind of absorb as much as you can from tonight's conversation. And I want to get things started by bringing someone to the screen who has a wealth of information related to the first year experience for our students. So with that, Beth Martin, I will bring you on. The mic is yours, and enjoy your time talking to our students.
Hi, everybody. So Stanley, can you just note that this is working? I just want to double check before I start talking. Perfect.
Good to go.
Okay, perfect. It's really nice to see some of you, to be talking to all of you here. I'm very excited to talk to you about first year social work. So I'm Dr. Beth Martin. I teach the first year courses in the social work program. And I'm also a graduate of the social work program from Carleton. So I have both perspectives on social work at Carleton. So in the first year, if you join social work in the first year, this is if you're joining from high school, or if you're joining in the second year without a college diploma, you will be taking the Social Work 1001, which is Intro to Social Welfare, and Social Work 1002, which is Intro to Social Work, one in the fall semester, one in the winter semester. And I teach both of them. They are large courses with lots of non-social work students as well, which is really awesome because we get to talk to, we get lots of different perspectives and get everybody to talk to each other and learn from each other and really provide all your knowledge. So what do we cover in these courses? Well, we're talking about we're learning the beginnings of social work and the beginnings of the context of social work. And what I mean by that is what influences social work. So this world that social workers work in, the problems that social workers work on, and what shapes those problems that they're working on. So in the first semester, in the fall semester, when we're talking about social welfare, we learn about the context of social welfare, the context of policies that affect people's lives in Canada. We go through a number of different areas of social welfare. So as well as kind of talking about the things like history and theory and that kind of thing, we're also talking about different policy areas and making lots of connections to current affairs. So we talk about poverty, we talk about migration, we talk about climate change, we talk about children, and then we make those connections. This semester we've been talking about COVID-19, we've been talking about long-term care facilities, we've been talking about Black Lives Matter, we've been talking about the treatment of Indigenous people in healthcare after what happened to Joyce Echequan. So we really do make lots of those connections in terms of what's going on right now. So it's always different from one semester to the next. That's social welfare, so that provides the context within which social workers work. And in the second semester, in the winter semester, we really go into social work. What is social work? who are social workers, how do social workers think. We think about ethical questions in social work, and again we explore different areas of social work. So in that course we might talk about working with people with disabilities, we might talk about working in child protection. We always talk about what we call different levels of social work, so working with individuals and families, working with communities, working in research. We talk about policy work. We've talked a lot about policy work in the first semester, which includes doing policy advocacy. So that's covered kind of in both semesters. So over the course of the 2 semesters, what you're learning to do is think about who you are and what kind of social worker you might want to be. You're learning to analyze policies, so thinking about the different policies that affects our daily lives, that affect the lives of your clients. You're thinking about and analyzing them and how they really do affect the lives of people every day, and how that's different from what the politicians tell us. You're learning how to describe social policies and to describe social work in different areas. You're learning to advocate for change. So one of the assignments that you'll do is creating an advocacy piece. We've had students doing dance, we've had students doing posters, doing videos, doing songs, doing spoken word is another one. I've got somebody doing pottery this year as an advocacy piece. So you get to be creative in terms of advocating for change to a policy. And then on top of all of this, you're learning the skills that will be useful, that will really set you up well for the next 3 years in the social work program. So things like how to do research in the library. Social work is a very research heavy program. You'll be writing lots of research papers, as I'm sure Emily can tell you, and you'll also be doing a lot of self-reflection. And so we start practicing these skills already in the first year, because you'll be doing it so much in the later years. And that, I think that's pretty much everything I have to say. I'm happy to answer lots of questions. I'm not sure I was talking fast, which is something I always do when I've got a lot to fit in. I had a great time. So I did 3rd year entry in the social work program. I didn't have to take this 1st year course, but I was a TA for this course when I was a student in the BSW program. I didn't actually I did talk about who I am. So I came as an international student to Carleton to do my Bachelor of Social Work. Through one of my practicums at Carleton, I ended up working for the Canadian Red Cross. That was deliberate. I really wanted to work in the international development field. I don't think it is development, but that's how it's referred to. And I ended up working for many years for the Canadian Red Cross and for the International Red Cross. So directly stemming from my studies in Carleton, I worked in Canada, but I also worked in Germany in 2015 with the refugees. I worked in Liberia, Sierra Leone and the Congo with the International Red Cross as well. So I've had a really rich career that stems directly from my studies at Carleton, and then my PhD, my research is all around migration and is very much linked to the work that I've done as a social worker as well. But I'm very interested in all sorts of different areas of social work, which is one of the reasons I love teaching the 1st year courses, because we cover so many different topics. Before I finish, I should have done this at the beginning. I want to acknowledge that I'm on the unceded and traditional territories of the Algonquin Nation. That's something I try to bring up in every class, in every presentation we're doing, and I should have done that at the beginning. So I want to thank the Algonquin peoples on whose land I'm a guest, and we talk about that and why it's so important to do that throughout the whole course. Okay, I think I'll finish there for the moment, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. We'll bring you back because there are some questions that I want you to touch on. Before we do, we of course want to hear from a current student. So I'm going to bring Emily Bennett to the screen. She is in her 3rd year here in social work. I want to remind you all that first, thank you for attending, but also to continue to feed those questions into the live event Q&A. What we'll do is we'll get a chance to answer those questions live. And so we definitely want you to send us as many questions as you like, as you may have about the social work program and the Carleton experience. Okay, so it's now time to hear again from a current student, 3rd year social work. Her name is Emily. She's got a lot of cool things to share. So Emily, you're up.
Sweet. So hi, everybody. My name is Emily. My pronouns are she and her, and I am in my 3rd year of my Bachelor of Social Work at Carleton. And I also am doing minors in disability studies and sign language. I have a few little things to talk to you guys about today. And for starters, why I chose Carleton. So one of the main reasons that I chose Carleton is because I do identify as a student with disabilities. I am somebody who suffers from generalized anxiety disorder as well as a slow processing learning disorder. And so the Paul Menton Center and the academic accommodations that are available to students at Carleton were a huge draw for me. And knowing that the Faculty of Public Affairs is as inclusive as probably more inclusive than a lot of the other faculties at Carleton, just in the nature. It was a huge draw for me. My absolute favorite first year class, don't tell Beth, but unfortunately it was my disability studies class. This course actually offered me a fair bit of freedom in terms of choice of assignment topics, which is something that I found very important throughout my first year classes, similar to Beth's class, I'll give her that. I like the freedom to kind of be able to choose more of the nature of your project or exactly how you plan on completing it, because it allows you to branch out and discover what your true interests are, which is a huge part of your first year at Carleton. Disability studies and the social work courses also really helped me to think more intersectionally throughout all of my classes, and to be able to view things from a whole bunch of different lenses and points of view. The last thing that I'm going to cover with you guys is what I wish I knew when I was coming to university at Carleton. And first and foremost, I really want you guys to know that your TAs and your professors are there for you. They are there to help you with your education, and you are more than welcome to request meetings with them, to ask questions, to ask for reviews on your papers and your projects and get feedback. My first ever university paper was actually for Beth's Social Work 1001 class, and I got a grade that I was super unimpressed with. But I went and I saw my TA, I asked questions, I asked where I can improve, and was able to completely turn my grade around by the end of the semester and came out with a grade that I was really proud of for that course. Also, quickly, extracurriculars. I know this is something that you guys might be a little timid of. First year, going into all of these classes, it's a new experience. You've got so many things to think about and focus on, but make sure that you guys are getting involved in things that aren't totally academic related. Having that ability to kind of step back from your courses, breathe a little bit, and do something that you find super entertaining. Maybe it helps calm you down, and make new friends. One of my favorite extracurriculars at Carleton was I participated in Relay for Life. This was something that I had done all throughout high school and knew that it was a good opportunity to continue to do in university, and also look into getting jobs on campus. I'm currently doing my second year of work with the Carleton Disability Awareness Center, which is a CUSA service center. And that has allowed me to meet a whole bunch of new people, and it's also great social work experience that I can put on my resume when I graduate. And with that, I'll pass it back off to Stanley.
All right, so Emily, there was a question about that first year experience. So they're wondering, what is it like, being in social work in year one? So before we kind of take a step backwards and talk a bit more about the application process, maybe you can tell us a bit more about your first year experience in social work specifically, kind of taking those intro courses.
Absolutely. In all honesty, I only applied to Carleton. That was my one and only goal. So when I was in grade 12, I applied to criminology, child studies, and social work, all at Carleton. And I was really just holding out for that social work acceptance. So I was quite happy to get the acceptance. And first year was amazing. I was a very, very anxious person in high school. And the social work program really helped me to become more comfortable with who I am and who I am in terms of my academia. And so I took as many different courses as I could that I knew that I would be interested in, my required social work courses, but then I also took some disability studies classes, women and gender studies, sign language, which was really cool, psychology, anthropology, sociology. Like, I really branched out and tried to kind of figure out what I was interested in the most, so that I could focus on that later. And I think that's a really important part of first year, is kind of maybe trying a course that you're not 100% sure that you'll like, because a lot of them will surprise you. And it's definitely a lot of fun. Frosh is amazing. I got to meet lots of new people in my program and can happily say that I have way more friends in my program now than I did in high school. And it's definitely comforting to know that you have all of these people that you're surrounded by that have the same interests as you. You have the same classes, so you can talk about your assignments, you can talk about extracurriculars. It really is a lot of fun, and it's important to remember to step outside of your comfort zone a little bit, because you'll find all these things that you love that you never even knew you loved.
And there was another question in there in the Q&A about your disability studies courses being electives, which you touched on. And it's one of the kind of cool parts of social work is the ability to pair some of your core courses with other classes that may be of interest as well. So it's nice to be able to kind of ease your way into your post-secondary experience by doing a bit of both, which is really nice. So Emily, I'm going to put you off screen for a second and bring Beth back in, but folks, Emily will still be and is still available to answer more questions about the student experience. I'm bringing Beth back in because there have been some questions about the application process, and I was hoping we can have a conversation about that. So so if a student is thinking about applying to Carleton for social work, what's the kind of process like? What happens once they submit their application, or what's the kind of additional piece that they're going to be needing to include to get in?
So I'm not the biggest expert on this. I'm just going to tell you up front. It's called Andrea Kenny. She is the undergrad administrator for the BSW program, and she knows everything there is to know about the application process. But I do know the basics because I'm involved in the reviewing, and I was involved in the open house a couple of weeks ago. So I was answering questions about that. And the basic process is there's the standard university application that you have to do, and then there's the supplementary application that is specific to social work. And that's what we review to decide who is going to get into the program. So usually I think it's about 30 or 40% in the first year that are accepted into the program. So it is quite a difficult program to get into. And there's different dates for the two as well. And I don't know the dates off the top of my head. I believe it's the first, the general university application first, and then the BSW specific supplementary application second. Okay, Emily's nodding, so that's, yeah. And the supplementary application, which is what I can speak to more than I don't really know much about the general one, but the supplementary application asks for things like your experience, your practical experience, your volunteer and work experience, working in positions that might have put you in a good position to be able to study social work. And by that, we're thinking about things like working with children. So for example, if you've worked on a summer camp, or volunteering for organizations, or if you've done political advocacy, if you've been worked in, as a volunteer doing advocacy. There are also, you should always include any kind of experience that you have that's working with other people. So we do look, if people have been working as servers, for example, that involves working with other people, navigating different personalities, working with other people. It doesn't count as much as it would if you were really working as a volunteer in a social services organization, but it still counts. So my advice is always to applicants, put everything in there, and then we'll go through it and we'll figure it out. Because if you haven't put something in there, then we don't know about it and we can't count it. So it's best to just put all of the experience that you have in there. That's a big piece of the supplementary application. Another big piece of the supplementary application is the essays that you have to write. So you have to write 3 different essays. I should just mention that you access this supplementary application via the School of Social Work website. So if you go to the website, you go to prospective students, undergrads, then you can, it has the link there to the supplementary application. And there are 3 different questions that you have to answer in the essays. Emily can maybe speak to this more as well. There's one that kind of like talks about yourself. There's one that talks about an issue, a social work issue that you would like to address. And then there's one that talks about why Carleton. And so I would advise you to start thinking about those well in advance, because the essays are quite important when we're looking and when we're doing the looking at the different applications. So really start thinking about them well in advance and how you're going to answer them and how you're going to use those essays to make you stand out from other students. So, you know, a good example is, why do you want to study at Carleton? We're not looking for, because I live in Ottawa and it's a nice city. We're looking for you to understand a little bit about Carleton School of Social Work and why you'd like to come to Carleton School of Social Work as opposed to a different School of Social Work. I can tell you, for me, when I was doing this application, I remember that one of the things that I wrote about was the fact that I wanted to go and work for an organisation like the Red Cross, and Ottawa was the place where a lot of those organisations were based. So that was one of the reasons that I gave in my application for wanting to come to Carleton specifically. So that's another piece of the supplementary application. We also ask for references, and so that's another piece where I would advise you to get onto that sooner rather than later. There are a lot of people applying for university this year. I get asked to do references for master's programs, and I've never been asked to write as many references as I have this year. And I've had to start saying no, because I just don't have the time to write anymore. So in terms of the references, make sure that you're respecting people's time and reaching out to people well in advance. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that, the other things in terms of the supplementary application that we're using, that we're looking at, your GPA is one which obviously, you know, hopefully you're all working to make sure your GPA is as high as possible. And I think off the top of my head, I think that those are the different things that we look at in terms of, oh, and we look at if you're a college entry student, if you've done a placement before as well. But that's not so relevant for first year. So we have the first year entry, the second year entry, and the third year entry, and we go through the admissions for each group separately. So there's a separate number that we accept for each group, and we do them in the meeting, we do them separately. So if you're first year entry, you're competing with other people who are applying for first year entry. You're not competing with people who already have a college diploma or a university degree, just to kind of reassure you if that's a question. Yeah, I think that's an overview. If you have any, I know Emily wants to speak to this as well, and then any technical questions is great for Andrea. Oh, one other thing as well that I should mention, so especially for those of you who apply for first year, like I say, it is quite competitive, so not everybody does get in, but one option that you have if you don't get in is applying for general admission to Carleton University, taking the first year courses as electives. So you're not in the social work program yet, but you can, because my courses, the first year courses are open to anybody, you can take them as electives and then reapplying for second year entry. So you take a bunch of other electives and the social work first year classes, and then if you get in for second year entry, you're in exactly the same position as the students who got in with first year entry. You're not behind at all. So that's something that we get a number of students doing each year, and they find when they take those first year courses, they might find that social work isn't for them after all, and that's fine, and they go off and do something else. Or they might find, as often happens, that it really reinforces their desire to go into social work. And because, as I was saying, the social work, the first year courses really set students up for the rest of the program, it's also setting students up to write good applications when they're applying for second year entry. So that's an option if you apply in the first year and then you don't quite get in to reapply in the second year. Okay, I'll stop there.
No, that's great. That's a lot of really awesome information, and it's one of those things where, one of those programs where, because there is that additional component, that additional piece, it's important for students to kind of note that it's not going to be just about their grades. Their grades are going to matter, and you certainly want to do well academically. It's a balance of the two. It's about performing well with your academic side of things, but also putting some real thought and intent with your personal information document, so that when folks like Beth are reading it, you know, there's a real kind of connection to what your intentions are with this this awesome program. Before I get Emily back in to share her thoughts on her process, because she went through the application process going into first year, you mentioned, Beth, writing references for students who are applying to various master's programs, and there was a question about that, about whether or not there are other options for students who are looking to do graduate work outside of social work. So in your experience writing these references, what other programs these Bachelor of Social Work graduates tend to gravitate towards?
Oh, so you mean for students who have done a BSW, if they go into different graduate programs?
Yeah, so there were a couple of questions about that. So there was one where folks were wondering, you know, if I finish my BSW but I don't want to do a master's of social work, are there other kind of masters that social work students gravitate towards, or kind of end up taking more often than not? And then there was a question of the kind of official status, whether or not you can become a social worker once you've graduated from the BSW program.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I'll do the second one first, because that's like a really simple answer. So the BSW is a professional program, like at the BS or at the undergraduate level. Once you graduate from the BSW program, you can register as a registered social worker. A lot of students eventually, either immediately or eventually, I favor eventually, because I think it's always great to go out and get experience before you do an MSW. But a lot of students do the MSW eventually, just because that opens access to more jobs. So there are certain areas of social work that really require an MSW, such as social work in hospitals is a really obvious example, rather than just a BSW. But once you have a BSW, you can register with your provincial college of social workers. So it is a professional program in itself. In terms of other programs that students go into, so I mainly see students going on to the Masters of Social Work rather than going and doing non-professional programs. I think the fact that it is a professional program makes it really attractive. And one of the things that I love about social work is how broad it is. So it really does qualify you to do such a huge range of different types of jobs. And I think a lot of students like to stick with that rather than narrowing themselves down. But because it is so broad, you could easily go from a Bachelor of Social Work into a Master. So when we talk about social work, as I was saying, you have the kind of like the more individual types of social work, which might send you more into a Master's in psychology, for example. Masters in counselling, we get quite a few students going into those programs. We have the more community type social work. We have the social work that works with people in different communities. So you could do a Master's in Disability Studies to just kind of follow up on what Emily was just talking about. Critical Disability Studies at York, that's a very good program, I hear. And then there's the social work around policies and politics. So you can go into a Master's of Sociology, a Master's of Political Science, a Master's of Public Policy. I know a lot of social workers from my cohort from 15 years ago who now work for the government. And so they're doing more of that policy-oriented work. So I did my MSW at McGill, but then I went, and my PhD wasn't in social work. My PhD was in policy studies, in immigration policy specifically at Ryerson University. So there really are lots and lots of different areas that you can work in and that you can go into in terms of studies after social work. And one of the things that I think is fantastic about social work is how it does introduce you to all of these different areas, and it also makes the connections between the different areas, which I think you might not get as much if you were studying just in one of those individual disciplines. We really learn the connections between psychology and sociology and political science and economics, rather than just studying one or the other. We're always looking at how they influence each other.
I love it. I love the energy. I think you're giving some really great responses, Beth, and I know Emily is kind of dying to get into this conversation. So I'm gonna bring her back in and share a bit more about her experience, you know, going through again that application process, because it is one that is going to kind of test students, and not everyone gets in. You know, we admit roughly 60 or so first-year students. And so for you, Emily, what was it like kind of going through the application process, and what kind of references did you put in there? Just kind of give a bit of a insider info on what made your application successful in your opinion.
I was so scared. Like I said, I only applied to Carleton. Social work was my dream program, but I did have 2 other fallback programs. And in all honesty, I was so nervous and so convinced that I wasn't going to get into social work that I almost accepted another offer. So my first piece of advice is to wait it out. There is the supplemental application, which is usually due March 1st. And so that was the big stressor for me, was that my supplemental application wasn't even due until after some people had already started getting their early offers. And so, like I was saying, make sure you wait it out. Everything will be okay in the end. You will still have time to accept other offers if, worst case scenario, you don't end up getting into the program. It was definitely a stressful process. In terms of the supplemental applications, my first piece of advice for you guys is to be honest and to not be afraid to be vulnerable. My high school guidance counselor helped me with my essays, and so I went in there the first time and she basically just ripped them up and was like, try again. And so when I came around the second time, I made sure that, I really put out who I was, why I wanted to be in the program, what my experience is and was, my personal social location, so who I am, what my privileges are, where I may have not had quite as much privilege in certain places as well, coming as being a woman and a person with disabilities. And yeah, like I was saying, be honest, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Social work is all about reflecting on who you are and how who you are can help other people. And so being able to recognize fully who you are and being able to openly share that with the admissions committee is going to be huge and super beneficial for you guys. In terms of your references, you're going to want people who have seen you work with other people, who can vouch for you being a good person and having initiative and really truly caring for the people that you're working with. And so for me, I was a dance teacher for quite a very long period of time, particularly with young children and children with special needs. And so this was one of the references that I reached out for. And another one was my guidance counselor, actually. She had been through with me all throughout high school. She heard all my ups and my downs, and she was able to really talk about my resiliency as well as extracurriculars that I was participating in throughout school, as well as my academics. She was able to vouch for my grades and how I was participating in high school as well. So in terms of references, that's kind of what I would go for. I believe they do require one academic and one that talks about your extracurriculars, your work, your volunteering, that kind of thing. I could be wrong, so please verify that. But that I'm pretty sure is what it is. And so yeah, like I was saying, just be honest, be vulnerable, and don't be afraid to be yourself.
Now, there was a question in the chat about the placement opportunities and how that works. And social work is pretty cool because it does have this kind of placement built into the program. So maybe you can talk a bit more about that and what you're looking forward to with your placement opportunities, and then also maybe touch on the construction of your courses and how you've been able to kind of really, again, select classes both inside work that play with your areas of interest, your various areas of interest.
Yeah, so for starters, social work is a super awesome program because you have the availability to do 2 minors. A lot of other programs don't have this option. And so I really took up on this right away. Actually, I can't say right away. First year, I wasn't really sure what I wanted. I kind of went into things, tried a whole bunch of different courses, And that's kind of where I discovered my love for disability studies, which is one of my minors. And so I ended up doing 1 or 2 summer courses along the way just to kind of get back on track with my double minors and to play a little bit of catch up, but also to get ahead. As a student with disabilities, it's not always possible to do a full course load, which is why I like summer school, because it means I can stay in line with the rest of my peers in my course. But yeah, I really branched out first year, which helped me to actually narrow down what I was interested in by second year, and especially this year. This year is particularly special because of COVID. We actually started our practicum application back in second year, pretty early in second year actually, and then it kind of starts to get a little bit more finalized towards the end of second year. Of course, by the end of second year, which was last year for me, that's when COVID started rolling around. So things were changing, but the department did pretty well at trying to keep us up to date with everything regarding our placement, just because it is a requirement to graduate. And so this year, I've finally gotten my practicum. I finished my application, I finished my interview, we worked on our resume and everything. And originally, your third year practicum is supposed to be a full year practicum, which means you do it part-time from September through to April. This year, however, again, COVID, we've switched over to doing my placement from January to April full-time and doing a full 5 courses this semester. And so what you do is you fill out an application with your main areas of interest. So for me, that includes working with children, working with those with neurodiversity, pretty much everything with children, honestly, and particularly also areas, organizations of interest. And so for me, that included like Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Children's Aid Society, Thinking in Pictures Educational Services, also referred to as TYPES. And they're actually who I was able to get my practicum with, which is super exciting. The practicum coordinators did a really good job at matching me with an organization that I really wanted, which is fantastic. And so I will be doing my practicum virtually, so remotely from home next semester. I will be helping to run different programs for neurodiverse children and youth, particularly those with anxieties. That's my specialization, and just kind of helping out administratively where I can. And then you also, again, super cool program, have the ability to do a 4th year practicum as well. You actually have to graduate, but it's another really cool part of the program. And that's where it gets a little bit more specific into different things, and you can get into more professional organizations as well. So the Children's Aid Society, working in hospitals, that kind of thing.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I see that Beth has a comment about placement as well, so.
Yeah, I'll bring Beth into the conversation again. Yeah, so this is a lot of really great conversations are happening. I just want to kind of reset and remind folks that we are again talking to Beth and Emily. Beth Martin, Dr. Beth Martin is a professor in the Bachelor of Social Work, and Emily Bennett is a 3rd year student in BSW at Carleton. And so we're getting some really great questions. So if there are more questions, please keep on asking. So yeah, Beth, I don't know if you wanted to add some more about the practicum element that is so essential to the social work program.
Yeah, so for sure. So I've already talked about how it was my 4th year practicum that basically led to my entire career in social work and eventually my PhD as well. But I wanted to speak to a much more recent experience that just finished last week. So along with being a prof at Carleton, in a volunteer capacity, I'm on the advisory committee of a local grassroots organisation called Hidden Harvest Ottawa. And we're a gleaning organisation. And what we do is we find people who have fruit trees in their gardens and volunteers to pick the fruit and then donate that to the food banks and other organizations that work to address food insecurity. And so this past semester, I was supervising a placement student, a practicum student at Hidden Harvest. So it wasn't in my role as a professor, it was in my role as an advisory committee member at Hidden Harvest. And so that was an online placement. So I wanted to speak to this to kind of give an idea of how much can be done in online placements as well. So we just wrapped up, we had our final meeting last week. It was a full-time placement. She was working for us 4 days a week from Alberta. She's based in Alberta, but she did a huge amount of different things for us. So we're a very volunteer-based organization. We don't have permanent paid staff, so we get everything done as volunteers, which means we don't have much time to do anything. So she was really in the thick of things, helping us do the tasks that we need to do to keep going as an organization. So some of the things she said that she really learned a lot from being able to do, and that she was able to do online. She wrote a massive grant application for us. That's extremely useful, an extremely useful experience if you're wanting to go and work in any kind of local community organization, grant writing. She did reporting for us, annual reporting in terms of with our AGM coming up. She produced a big presentation where she had gone through all of the surveys for our volunteers, for the people who have the trees, for the food banks. She'd gone through, she'd brought all the numbers together, so she did this big presentation. She was also preparing content for the website for us, so different pieces in terms of what needed to go on the website. So she was doing I'm forgetting some of the things she was doing as well, but she did a number of big projects in terms of things that she was coming to our meetings our advisory committee meetings. So she was really at the heart of the decision making that happens in the organization. So she was doing a number of different things that were really, really useful, and she said she could really see how they were helping us as a grassroots organization, and that we're helping her to learn as well in terms of going and being a social worker in the future. And so there is a lot. I wanted to talk about that because there's so much you can do even if you're online. And then I've been speaking to others who are doing more working with clients, doing counselling, that kind of thing online. And there are lots of different opportunities for practicums online. Although hopefully by the time, if you're entering in the first year, hopefully by the time you're at practicum, we'll be over all of this and you'll be back in the field again. But it really was a great experience supervising her practicum. Just to go back, I just wanted to go back to admissions for a second as well, and just to encourage those of you who might have been listening to how we were talking and thinking, oh, I'm not sure, if I'd be able to write an application that's going to get in, especially if you're not kind of like the standard student coming out of high school who has volunteer hours that you were doing while you were in high school. You might be a mature student, for example. You might have been busy with childcare responsibilities, with other responsibilities. And I really do, or you might be in a situation where just your life circumstances mean that, you haven't been able to do that volunteer work that you suspect other applicants might have done. Still apply. We take those kind of circumstances into consideration, talk about them in your essay, and there's also the option to kind of do a little add something as well if there are circumstances that mean that you don't necessarily have the hours that we're looking for. So I really would encourage you to apply anyway, and be open and honest, as Emily was saying, about who you are and also about your circumstances, because we do look at that when we're going through the applications. It's not just a straight, this number of hours means that you're going to get in. We're looking at people's circumstances. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I always tell students that applying to Carleton is starting a conversation, and applying to social work really is that. Like you really are starting a conversation, and while there are kind of deadlines to keep in mind, and in case of social work, March 1st is the deadline to submit that supplemental application to the department, and you want to get your application in to Carleton by February 1st. But again, it's really important to note, like Beth just said, the importance of telling your story and really being honest with that story and authentic, and letting us be able to really understand you and see how we can perhaps find a fit in the program. We're coming to the end of the event, but before we wrap things up, Beth, I want to give you a chance to say some, I mean, you give some great advice already, but do you have any more advice or kind of last words of encouragement for our attendees?
Just like I just said, you know, if you're interested at all, reach out to us if you have more questions. I'm happy. So my details are all on the website. And also, if it's technical questions, Andrea is the person to go to. But if you're interested at all, then just apply and see what happens. And then there's also there's always that other option of coming to Carleton, taking the course. If you don't like it, that's fine. You know, but if you might find that you really do enjoy it. Every year there are a number of students who take the course as non-social work students and end up applying and getting into the program with second year entry. So I love social work. I absolutely love it. I love teaching in the School of Social Work, which is where I started my whole journey in social work. I feel like I've come full circle, and it's I particularly love teaching the first year courses. I think it's great. It's a great bunch of students. It's really nice to learn from each other because there are so many students. And so I would encourage all of you, whether or not in social work, to come take the first year social work courses. I think that's it. Thanks. And thanks for organising this, everybody, Stanley and everybody else who was organising.
Awesome. And I'm going to bring Emily in to give her a chance to also share some last words of advice.
Yeah, so just like Beth was saying, I do want to reiterate, don't be afraid to apply. I know that it can be a daunting process, but honestly, there's no harm in applying. The absolute worst thing that's going to happen is, you know, maybe it's a not right now situation. So don't be afraid to apply. Try your absolute best. This is a process that I went through. I made it. I survived. And it's the process that my little sister is going through right now. She just applied to the political science program here at Carleton. That's her program that she's really hoping to get into. And so just remember, you're not alone. And that goes into your first year as well. If you guys do end up coming to Carleton, which I really hope you do, don't be afraid to branch out, try new things, meet new people, and get as involved as you possibly can.
Awesome stuff. I want to thank you, Emily, and thank you, Dr. Martin, for spending some time this evening. I want to remind folks that we are here, as always, to help. Admissions.carleton.ca is our website, and we definitely encourage you to set up your 360 account, 360.carleton.ca to do so. You'll see the information on the screen. We'll stick around for another 5 minutes or so to answer any last minute questions you may have. Again, big thanks to all of you for tuning in. I hope you found tonight's session enjoyable and informative, and got you excited for what will be certainly an amazing journey if you choose the Bachelor of Social Work. So the voice you're hearing is Stanley Philippe. I hope you have an amazing evening, and we will see you again very soon. Take care.